Welcome back to week 23 of the Come Follow Me Scriptures study program. I know I left you hanging last week with the fate of Alma the Younger and the sons of Mosiah in the balance, but I wanted to tell you that story from the beginning, and there were so many other fascinating elements in the previous chapters that I wanted to cover, so I decided to wait until I could give these boys their due. So, today, we're going to start with chapter 27 of Mosiah and go through the rest of the book. If you'll recall, Mosiah and Alma had established a great peace throughout the land, which lasted several years, but then, sadly, that peace began to be threatened. Remember last week how we read that many of the rising generation could not understand the words of King Benjamin, being little children at the time of his address? Well, unfortunately, that included the 4 sons of Mosiah and also one of the sons of Alma, he being called Alma as well. We will refer to him as Alma the Younger here. These 5 boys, along with many others, went about causing disruptions among the people, and their actions rose to the level of persecution. We spoke last week of how Mosiah issued a decree that stopped that persecution for the most part throughout the land. That resulted in great growth, and the people began to scatter to the north and to the south and to the east and to the west. And verse 7 of Mosiah 27 says, "And the Lord did visit them and prosper them, and they became a large and wealthy people." But then it says, "Now the sons of Mosiah were numbered among the unbelievers, and also one of the sons of Alma was numbered among them, he being called Alma after his father. Nevertheless, he became a very wicked and idolatrous man, and he was a man of many words and did speak much flattery to the people. Therefore he led many people to do after the manner of his iniquities. And he became a great hinderment to the prosperity of the church of God, stealing away the hearts of the people, causing much dissension among the people, giving chance for the enemy of God to exercise his power over them." Last week I ended by saying, here were 2 men dedicated to the building up of the kingdom of God, and their own sons were standing in the way. One might ask, why would God allow such a thing to happen? But we must remember that agency is the most inviolate principle of the gospel, and God could not force these sons to change their ways. What he could do, though, was answer the prayers of their fathers and provide a way for the sons to change their ways. So we pick up the story here in chapter 27. Verse 10, speaking of Alma the Younger, begins with this: "And now it came to pass that while he was going about to destroy the church, for he did go about secretly with the sons of Mosiah, seeking to destroy the church, and to lead astray the people of the Lord, contrary to the commandments of God, or even of the king." Here we see that the boys were sinning against God and going against civil law as well, by ignoring the edict of the king. But here is one great lesson we get from this chapter, and there are so many throughout the pages of the Book of Mormon. God could not revoke the agency of these boys. It was their will to do these awful things, and that was their exercise of their agency. But the Lord did have a workaround. The fathers of these boys, that would be Mosiah and Alma, prayed mightily to the Lord, and he could answer their prayers. So as the boys were going about seeking to destroy the church, an angel of the Lord appeared to them. This was quite dramatic, so let's read what it says. Behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto them, and he descended as it were in a cloud. And he spake with the voice of thunder, which caused the earth to shake upon which they stood. And so great was their astonishment, that they fell to the earth, and understood not the words which he spake unto them. Nevertheless, he cried again, saying, Alma, arise, and stand forth. For why persecutest thou the church of God? For the Lord hath said, This is my church, and I will establish it, and nothing shall overthrow it, save it is the transgression of my people. Notice here that the angel did not strike the boys dead or otherwise directly block their effort. He simply asked why they did what they did, and he let them know that their efforts would be futile in the long run. The Lord would not be defeated unless the people chose to ignore him and do wickedly. So why did the angel come to them then? Well, listen carefully to what the angel told Alma. And again the angel said, Behold, the Lord hath heard the prayers of his people, and also the prayers of his servant Alma, who is thy father. For he has prayed with much faith concerning thee, that thou might be brought to the knowledge of the truth. Therefore, for this reason I have come to convince thee of the power and authority of God, that the prayers of his servants might be answered according to their will. So here we see that while the Lord was not going to take away the agency of the boys to do the evil they desired to do, he was going to answer the prayer of others more faithful who had prayed mightily on their behalf. So how was the Lord going to stop them without violating their agency? Well, notice that the angel did not say, I am here to stop you. Rather, he said, Your father has prayed that ye might be brought to a knowledge of the truth. And the angel actually said, I have come to convince thee of the power and authority of God. Nowhere in any of that is there a violation of anyone's agency or free will. The hope of Alma the Elder was that if his son and the sons of Mosiah could only see the truth, they would stop their persecutions on their own. Remember, we read that being young, they had not understood the words of King Benjamin. For reasons we don't know, they somehow did not get that knowledge from their fathers as they grew up. But then, many of us understand the natural rebellion that teenagers have against their parents. So this is not really that unusual. The problem here was that these boys were so adept at spreading contention and wickedness that their efforts were a real and genuine threat to the peace and stability of the people of that land. So the prayers of the people had to be powerful enough to be heard by the Lord. Now, I'm in a bit of a pickle here because later in Alma 36 and 37, we are going to get a very full and fascinating first-person account from Alma the Younger of the details of this visit from the angel to him and just exactly what happened on that occasion. He will be talking to his son Helaman in great detail about this ordeal, so I want to save as much of that for then as I can. It is an extraordinary story, so be sure not to miss it. I've been looking forward to it all year. That will come out in the week of July 29th to August 4th and will be posted on the evening of July 28th. So today, let's see what Mosiah says about what happened to the boys. We'll get their viewpoint. The angel spoke to them and said, And now behold, can ye dispute the power of God? For behold, doth not my voice shake the earth? And can ye not behold me before you? And I am sent from God. And then he directed his words to Alma in particular. And now I say unto thee, Alma, go thy way, and seek to destroy the church no more, that their prayers may be answered, and this, even if thou wilt of thyself be cast off. And now it came to pass that these were the last words which the angel spake unto Alma, and he departed. This is an interesting account because whoever actually wrote these words, Mosiah or one of his scribes, may not have received the whole story from the boys at the time that this was written. because we have a much fuller story from the mouth of Alma himself later, as I said, in Alma 36 and 37. In that account, Alma tells Helaman that the angel spake many more things which he did not hear because he fell to the ground. But he says the sons of Mosiah who were with him did hear those things. Here in the account we have in Mosiah, the record says, And now Alma and those that were with him fell to the earth, for great was their astonishment. For with their own eyes they had beheld an angel of the Lord, and his voice was as thunder, which shook the earth. And they knew that there was nothing save the power of God that could shake the earth and cause it to tremble as though it would part asunder. And now the astonishment of Alma was so great that he became dumb, that he could not open his mouth. Yea, and he became weak, even that he could not move his hands. Therefore he was taken by those that were with him and carried helpless, even until he was laid before his father. And they rehearsed unto his father all that had happened unto them. And his father rejoiced, for he knew that it was the power of God. The record says Alma laid like this for the space of 2 days and 2 nights. Although in Alma 36, verse 10, Alma the Younger says, And it came to pass that I fell to earth, and it was for the space of 3 days and 3 nights that I could not open my mouth, neither had I the use of my limbs. The discrepancy? We must remember that the boys were out and about somewhere in the land when this occurred, and they had fallen also, so it must have taken some time for them to get their strength back. And then it must have taken some time for them to get Alma back to Zarahemla and to his father. So that could easily have taken a day to accomplish. By that reckoning, the senior Alma would have only seen his son in that state for 2 days. Needless to say, this event had a profound effect on the boys, and their change of heart was immediate. And notice that in none of this was their agency violated. All that had really happened to them was that they saw an angel and gained a testimony of the truth of God and of the things their fathers had been telling them all their lives. Well, that wasn't all that happened. Actually, there was a much more profound experience, but we will save that for Alma 36. For the purpose of this account, we'll let it stand as written, and it was that testimony that changed their lives. Such is the effect that missionary work has upon the people we teach throughout the world today. The gospel can change the most ardent sinner into a servant of God with the proper knowledge in their heart. So let's see what effect this event had on the sons of Mosiah and upon Alma the Younger. While Alma was going through his extraordinary experience in his paralyzed state, things were happening on the outside also. Alma the Elder and the sons of Mosiah, along with the rest of the people there assembled, raised their voices to the Lord. And it came to pass that after they had fasted and prayed for the space of 2 days and 2 nights, the limbs of Alma received their strength, and he stood up and began to speak unto them, bidding them to be of good comfort. For, he said, I have repented of my sins, and I have been redeemed of the Lord. Behold, I am born of the Spirit. As he continued, he said, Nevertheless, after wading through much tribulation and repenting nigh unto death, the Lord in his mercy hath seen fit to snatch me out of an everlasting burning, and I am born of God. My soul hath been redeemed from the gall of bitterness and the bonds of iniquity. I was in the darkest abyss, but now I behold the marvelous light of God. My soul was racked with eternal torment, but I am snatched, and my soul is pained no more. And then we read of his marvelous change and see the new path both he and the sons of Mosiah take from this point on. It says, And now it came to pass that Alma began from this time forward to teach the people, and those who were with Alma at the time the angel appeared unto them, and preaching the word of God in much tribulation, being greatly persecuted by those who were unbelievers, being smitten by many of them. So we see that now Alma was receiving that which he had personally doled out before. I'm sure it was a humbling experience for him and for the sons of Mosiah, who, by the way, were named Ammon, Aaron, Omner, and Himni. The scripture says, "But notwithstanding this, they did impart much consolation to the church, confirming their faith." I'm sure that even though they had been redeemed, the weight of their previous actions weighed heavily upon them. I know sins are forgiven and are remembered no more, but I think these guys could not help but contrast their actions before with their endeavors now. In verse 35, it says in part, "And they traveled throughout all of Zarahemla, striving to repair all the injuries they had done to the church." And then as we move into chapter 28, we see a most noble thing. They had been working to repair the damage done to the church in Zarahemla and had done a good amount of work toward that effort. But then their hearts turned to the Lamanites. We've seen this before, and it shows that they were in tune with the Spirit. They recognized the Lamanites as their brethren also and wanted to see what they could do on their behalf. So, speaking of the sons of Mosiah, chapter 28 begins with, "They took a small number with them and returned to their father, the king, and desired of him that they might, with those they had selected, go up into the land of Nephi, that they might preach the things which they had heard, and that they might impart the word of God to their brethren, the Lamanites." This was a bold but dangerous thing to do, but the sons of Mosiah were determined to bring the word of God to the Lamanites. It says, quote, "to cure them of their hatred towards the Nephites, and, quote, that they might become friendly to one another," close quote. How noble was that? After a struggle within himself and much prayer, Mosiah granted them according to their desires, and we will be reading in detail about each of their missions in coming chapters. But this left Mosiah with no one upon whom to confer the kingship of the land of Zarahemla, and it brought about a great change. But first, he had some business to take care of. So we now return once again to that collection of 24 gold plates that Limhi's people had found so many years before. The people were anxious to know. In fact, it says, quote, "they were desirous beyond measure to know concerning those people who had been destroyed," close quote. So it says, "And now he translated them by the means of those two stones which were fastened into the two rims of a bow. Now these things were prepared from the beginning and were handed down from generation to generation for the purpose of interpreting languages. And they have been kept and preserved by the hand of the Lord, that he should discover to every creature who should possess the land the iniquities and abominations of his people." And here we find a more detailed account of the Jaredites, the people of the gold plates. Remember, they had come almost 2,000 years before Mosiah and his people, so they were more ancient to them than the Nephites are to us today. Let's read verse 17. It says, "Now after Mosiah had finished translating these records, behold, it gave an account of a people who were destroyed, from the time that they were destroyed back to the building of the great tower, at the time the Lord confounded the language of the people, and they were scattered abroad upon the face of the earth, yea, and even from that time back until the creation of Adam." And verse 19 is interesting because it says, and remember, this is Mormon telling this story, "And this account shall be written hereafter, for behold, it is expedient that all people should know the things which are written in this account." Now that's interesting, because the only other mention we get from Mormon of these records is found in Alma, where Alma the Younger is telling Helaman about them. Alma the Younger says at that time that it is important for the people to understand what transpired for the Jaredites to all be destroyed, but he warns Helaman not to share with his people the oaths and covenants and signs and tokens that are also included in that record, or perhaps his people will also fall into wickedness. That's fair, I guess. But I find it interesting because Mormon interjected in the record of Mosiah that we just read that it was expedient that all people should know the things written in this account. And yet he, Mormon, never does get around to telling us about them and what those things were, or give us the account contained on that record. We only get it at the very end of the Book of Mormon when Moroni abridges Mosiah's translation and appends it onto the record which Mormon left him. At the end of Mormon chapter 7, Mormon bids us farewell and turns his manuscript over to Moroni. And it appears that Moroni didn't think he had much to add. He says, in fact, in Mormon 8, "Behold, I, Moroni, do finish the record of my father, Mormon. Behold, I have but a few things to write, which I have been commanded by my father." He then goes on to relate in a slightly more gentle way the horrible end of the Nephites. That seems to be the rest of the story that Mormon wanted him to finish. So we come to the end of the story that Mormon wanted to tell. But that leaves us without getting the story of the Jaredites that Mormon said all people should hear. Lucky for us, Moroni decides, in the end, almost as an afterthought, to add his abridgment of the Jaredite record onto the end of his father's record. Sadly, we only get a small portion of it. Moroni says not 100th part. But what a part that is. Again, I think I will save that for the end of the year when we get to the book of Ether, one of my favorite books. So back to Mosiah. We're getting through it here. The reason we got into this discussion of the 24 gold plates in the first place is because Mosiah had been given stewardship over all of the records, including the book of Lehi, the plates of brass that Nephi brought with him, the large plates of Nephi, which had been passed down from king to king, and the small plates of Nephi, which Amaleki had given to him. All these, in addition to the 24 gold plates of the Jaredites that were given to him by Limhi, king of Lehi Nephi. Mosiah had added to, or had someone add for him, the history of his own people there in Zarahemla, and the goings-on that we have covered over the last few weeks. He also had possession of the Urim and Thummim and the Liahona as well. He needed to pass these things on to the next caretaker, and since there was not going to be another king, he passed them on to Alma as the head of the church. From this point on, all the records would be together and passed from one prophet to another as the Lord directed. So here we get to the end of Mosiah, and he makes the biggest change in government that we have seen up till now. He decides there is no one to pass the kingdom to, so he institutes a major change. He switches the kingdom to a government ruled by judges, to be chosen by the voice of the people. He warns that, although a good king is a very good form of government, kings do not always turn out to be good, as evidenced by King Noah of Lehi Nephi. And he speaks of how hard it is to overcome a bad king. He warns, "And behold, now I say unto you, ye cannot dethrone an iniquitous king, save it be through much contention and the shedding of much blood. For behold, he has his friends in iniquity, and he keepeth his guards about him, and he teareth up the laws of those who have reigned in righteousness before him, and he trampleth under his feet the commandments of God." And it gets worse. Mosiah says, "And he enacteth laws, and sendeth them forth among his people, yea, laws after the manner of his own wickedness. And whosoever doth not obey his laws, he causeth to be destroyed. And whosoever doth rebel against him, he will send his armies against them to war. And if he can, he will destroy them. And thus an unrighteous king doth pervert the ways of all righteousness." We see this today from every dictator and potentate in the world. Mosiah was correct in this explanation on the perils of kingship, and he shows his wisdom and faith in the people as he explains, "Choose you by the voice of this people judges, that ye may be judged according to the laws which have been given you by our fathers, which are correct. and which were given them by the hand of the Lord. Now it is not common that the voice of the people desireth anything contrary to that which is right, but it is common for the lesser part of the people to desire that which is not right. Therefore, this shall ye observe, and make it your law, to do your business by the voice of the people. Mosiah's innovative plan was remarkably thorough and well thought out. He established lower courts and upper courts. He, in effect, provided appeals courts in order to keep the primary judges in line. He said, "And now, if ye have judges, and they do not judge you according to the law which has been given, ye can cause that they may be judged of a higher judge. And if your higher judges do not judge righteous judgments, ye shall cause that a small number of your lower judges should be gathered together, and they shall judge your higher judges according to the voice of the people." When Alexander Campbell wrote his anti-Mormon book, Delusions, one of his main contentions was that young Joseph Smith borrowed heavily from the budding young democracy of the United States. And this would have included the recognition that the U.S.'s three-part government provided a system of checks and balances not found in any other countries at the time. It was, I guess, a fair opinion of the authors, but notice the one significant difference between the Book of Mormon and the U.S. legal systems. In the U.S., there is instituted a multi-tiered system of courts and appellate courts and regional courts and higher courts of appeals, and finally the U.S. Supreme Court, which is also referred to as the Court of Last Resort. In the legal system instituted by Mosiah in the Book of Mormon, there is a difference. Mosiah allowed for the legal system to go both upwards towards the high court, but also to go back down to where a set of lower courts could overturn the high court decision. As we just read, your lower judges should be gathered together, and they shall judge your higher judges according to the voice of the people. This is a significant departure from the way the U.S. does it, and I think it shows that Alexander Campbell's opinion on this matter was wrong. And taking his assertion one step further, that Joseph Smith created the Book of Mormon, which he called, quote, the fabrication of a deluded or deliberately deceitful person, I would posit that a deliberately or deluded and deceitful person would not have come up with a legal system so similar to the U.S. system and yet significantly different with the additional protections it provided to guarantee justice and fairness to the people. It's little things like this that only strengthen my testimony and truth and the correctness of this amazing book. Now, if you realize what just happened here, you will see that this was, as near as I can tell, the institution of the first truly free and open society. Now, I know that back about the same time that this was going on, or maybe even a little before, that the concept of democracy had been established in ancient Greece. But nowhere in the old world or new do we find a people who had as much freedom as what Mosiah was offering to his people now. He says, as he's giving them his admonitions and advice, I command you to do these things in the fear of the Lord, and I command you to do these things that ye have no king. And then notice what he does here. He switches the liability of the righteousness or wickedness of the land from the king to the people. He says that if these people commit sins and iniquities, they shall be answered upon their own heads. For behold, I say unto you, the sins of many people have been caused by the iniquities of their kings. Therefore, their iniquities were answered upon the heads of their kings. Now, see what he did there? Before, the sins and iniquities of the people were upon the head of kings. But now he says, in this free and open society, you're going to be responsible for your own lives. The sins and iniquities shall be answered upon the heads of the people. They shall be accountable for their own behaviors. And he issues this strong warning. And if the time comes that the voice of the people doth choose iniquity, then is the time that the judgments of God will come upon you. Yea, then is the time he will visit you with great destruction, even as he has hitherto visited this land. All this was done that the people might enjoy a level of freedom and agency that no one had ever had before. Mosiah expresses his sincerest desire for their liberty. He says, as he is closing his remarks, "And now I desire that this inequality should no more be in the land, especially among this my people. But I desire that this land be a land of liberty, and every man may enjoy his rights and privileges alike, that we may live and inherit the land, yea, even as long as any of our posterity remain upon the face of the land." That was a profound and beautiful expression of his heart's desire. When he had said these things, then he returned once more to the ills of wicked kings and the troubles and trials even a righteous king faces trying to govern all the people all the time. He wanted people to take more individual responsibility for their own actions and their own welfare, urging all to do and bear their parts. He was giving up power and handing it over to the people, something that no world leader has ever wanted to do, except the founding fathers of the United States. When he had finished, it was very clear that his words had found their mark. For verse 38 says of the people, "Therefore they relinquished their desires for a king, and became anxious that every man should have an equal chance throughout the land. Yea, and every man expressed his willingness to answer for his own sins." And so the people gathered together and chose Alma to be their first chief judge, he being the high priest also at the time. Now this was Alma the Younger, the guy that got knocked down by the angel on the road. Remember, he had stayed behind while his friends, the sons of Mosiah, went into the land of Nephi to preach. And the year was now 91 BC, and the record says, "And thus commenced the reign of the judges throughout all the land of Zarahemla." So as we close out the book of Mosiah, we see the end of both Mosiah and also Alma the Elder. They had served the Lord well in their respective stations, and their accomplishments were great. They had unified the people of Nephi in this new land of Zarahemla that they were going to share with the Mulekites. And they had brought peace and prosperity to all the people. When they died, Mosiah was 63 years old, having served as king over Zarahemla for 30 years. Alma was 82 years old. These two were now gone, but their legacy lived on for generations and affected the course of the rest of the Book of Mormon. And we will miss them. So, we get to the book of Alma now. That's Alma the Younger. It's going to be a fascinating story and quite a ride for a good number of chapters and pages. We'll start that next week, and I hope you'll come back and join me for that. And I hope you are enjoying your journey through the Book of Mormon this year. I'm doing my best to make it interesting for you, and I hope I have been able to make these characters more real and alive than you might have experienced in past readings. So, see you next week. Until then, I'm Mark Swint. Thank you for listening.